just who is represented in our great city, and the multiple opportunities that do exist. And so, again, I think that there are areas that we can identify which we have evolved, being a native Nashvilleian, even seeing some of the areas that we wished for many years ago and the impact it has had on our opportunities and for our local community to thrive. But again, the majority of my experiences have been right here in Nashville as a young person and as an adult and as a professional.
Thank you, Dr. Battle.
Quick follow-up question, if I may, because I'm really curious. Very few Nashville natives I have come to know in my 30 years here. What high school did you graduate from?
I graduated from John Overton High School.
Okay, and were you the valedictorian or the salutatorian?
Not either of those. At best, I was the vice president of our student council.
Okay.
So that was really one of my first experiences of being in a leadership role. And took that experience on into college and into my career.
Great. Thanks for humoring me. I'm going to ask you the same thing, Chief.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for your question. Yeah, I'm a native Nashvilleian. I grew up in East Nashville. I was raised a little bit different, I think. My father was blind. My mom was disabled, so I didn't have a lot of interaction with my mom. My dad talked a lot about how Nashville used to be when he was a kid, when he would get on a bus and would have to go to the back of the bus or get up for someone, and or go to a restaurant, get a sack lunch, or go in the back door, or sit up in the balcony. I know, going through the school system, I went through the public school system my entire life as a kid, and I remember when officers used to come to the school, they would always have me stand up and they would put handcuffs on me, and I thought that was, to me at the time, it was kind of funny. It was like, hey, it's pretty cool. But when I look back at it, I was like, why did I always get picked? And in fact, even in my high school days, I used to go to Wise Market on Main Street, and they had these bags of cookies. It was like 50 cookies for $1. And so I would get these cookies and go home, and people used to call me the Cookie Monster. I ate so many of them. And so one day I go into the guidance counselor's office. They call me in, and there's two guys sitting in there, two male whites. And I'm thinking it's college recruiters. They're trying to, say, hey, we want you to come to our school, et cetera, because I played sports. And they said, hey, we're two detectives from the Metro Nashville Police Department. And they held up this picture of this guy. It was a male black, and they said he had a red shirt on. At the time, I had a University of Georgia shirt on, so it was a red shirt. It said, hey, it looks just like you. And I looked at the picture, and I said, all black people don't look alike. That's not me. And from that time, they said, well, hey, we're investigating the rape of an 89-year-old woman, and we have a fingerprint on the cookie container, and that if, you go down to juvenile at the Howard building and you take the print, and it can clear you. But on the way down, they talked to me about how if they didn't have a fingerprint, they could make a circumstantial case. And I remember being nervous and thinking, how this was going to go, et cetera. And it turned out it was a negative on the match. And so they took me home and dropped me off. And I remember I was just so nervous and scared. And I look back now as the chief of police, and I say, where could I have been? Had they made that case, would I be homeless? Would I be addicted? Would I be trying to find a place to live? Because that's what happens to people. They go through this cycle. And so I see a Nashville, a tale of two Nashvilles, when I grew up where there was, I believe, racism, even within the very police department that I worked for. Actually, the first time I actually had kind of an adverse view of the police, because I had a cousin that was killed by members of this police department. I was 9 years old at the time, and I remember going to the funeral, and they had ran over him on his motorcycle, and it was a big deal back then. And he wasn't in the right life, I admit, but he did not have to give his life. And so I grew up with a different perception, of Nashville and of the police, and I wanted to make a difference. And so here I am today as a chief. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to take 2 seconds and say thank you. By the way, those stories that the chief told are actually on today's front page, and I'm showing this mostly because this is one handsome picture of the chief. that our photographer George Walker took. But I also wanted to show this and say to you, thank you for being vulnerable and authentic about those experiences, because that just makes it so much more personal. And after hearing you share those with me, I had to go, how in God's name did he end up joining the police department that so traumatized you and your family? I mean, that's an incredible leap for me. And of course, I know you had a very, I don't even know how to say it, a cousin who could sell ice to Eskimos, and
Right.
he's the one who pushed you into joining the force. But the way that you were able to overcome that, like I said, after this trauma that your family went through to join the force, is incredible. And one of the things your cousin, Paul Flournoy, a longtime Metro police officer, shared was like, hey man, we can make change from the inside.
Right.
And I guess you must have bought what Paul told you.
Yeah, that's exactly our view. And my cousin Paul, we knew each other before we knew each other. His mom and my dad were brothers and sisters. We both were born in 1964. He was born in April. I always tell him he's a lot older than I am. I was born in November. Kind of something I do every April. But he could sell absolutely anything. And I was already doing good things in the community. In my high school, Tennessean had done an article, and he was like, hey, you know, this is a good opportunity to do some good. And I really wanted to help my community. And the sky's been the limit. I never thought I'd be chief of police, ever. But I had envisioned, in fact, spending 30 years and retiring and doing something else. But it is a unique story for the journey. But the only way to make change is from the inside. You can't stand on the outside and yell and scream and never do anything. I wanted to do something about it. And so I joined the police force in 1988, police department in 1988.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Swan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, well, I'm Director Chief Swan of the Nashville Fire Department in Office of Emergency Management, and I think from Dr. Battle and, of course, Drake's perspective, I come from outside. I'm originally from Virginia, and I come from a family of 18. I actually did a story with Brad. He has a way of pulling out those special stories. But I come from a family of 18, and my parents were a lot older. When I came along, my dad was 57, my mom was 46. And growing up in Virginia, in the area, I'm from Coburn, Virginia. It's a rural area, coal mining area, but experiencing of racism from an early age. A quick experience that I could share is that going to my sister's, and there was a local park, and as I was going to the park, I think I was about 10 to 11 years old. A couple of gentlemen in the truck. They were white, of course. They started using the N-word and telling me not to come to the park. But what I remember was I seen a police officer right after that incident, and when I began, I was scared. Of course, I was definitely shaken by that. And then when I went to the police officer and told him what happened, the first thing out of his mouth was, "What did you do?" That was the response he gave me. But to fast forward through that, my parents instilled in me the value of making yourself different, standing out, making sure that people don't like you because of who you are, but what you bring to the table, making sure that you're valuable. And just as Chief Drake was stating, my dad would tell me this all the time: if you want to make a difference, you got to get involved. And then from there, I went on to the military, and from the military, from Germany to Saudi Arabia to from other places in the States, I got a good view of, number one, diversity and how important diversity is. I also got a great perspective of the United States for being outside of it in these third world countries. Now, in my statement is always clear, we are by far, we're not perfect, but it's the best place to be. But there is a lot of things that has to happen, a lot of changes. I was in Saudi Arabia during wartime. I got held over when everybody else went back, and I remember one of the guys, International Airport, the cousin of King Fahd, he asked me a question, well, what are you doing here fighting this war? And I'm like, well, because I love America, I'm trying to liberate, Kuwait. And he's like, but in your own country, you're still considered a second-class citizen. And I did not have an answer. I tried to dance around. Well, we're better. We're doing better. So my point there is, it's up in your face, and it's amazing how people from outside, and it's always easier from outside looking in, but it was right in my face as a military soldier, and I've got to address that issue. And it stayed with me because I tried to then figure out how to answer that. But I've learned too that when someone show you who you are, you got to believe it and you got to accept it. And so I don't deny the issue that there's race problems and issues in America, but just like the other two guests here, I love history, and knowing history and loving history, it takes a special person to still be able to love and to be able to draw energy, not hatred, but my energy comes from understanding that there's a lot of people before me that sacrifice a lot, and sacrifice will cost you, and for some people it was their lives. So I take everything I do very serious, and understanding that the person that came before me bled, tears, sweat, and maybe their life to get where for me to be able to do the things I take for granted. And Brad, you pulled out a story from me when we did this story with my parents. My mom and dad would come and frequently visit me. I got on the fire department. I've been on the fire department since 1995. It'd be 26 years as of September. And my mom and dad would come visit me. I think I was on the department 2 or 3 years, and I was sharing the excitement I had for being on the department, because I've always sort of been in a leadership mindset, or being a public servant is a better word, right? And my mom was just, we were at my house in Madison, and I said, Mom, I'm gonna take you around Nashville and just show you around the city. I was really impressed. I wanted to go show TSU, Jefferson Street, Fisk, and all the rich history for Black America. But she was very adamant, and she looked at me, and she said, I don't really want to do that. And then she looked at me and said, why did you even pick Nashville? And for my mom to say that, it was just, because she was always trying to make sure, like most kids, to make their parents happy. But she had this look in her face like, why did you choose here? And I looked at my dad, and he sort of like this, looked away. And I started saying, because, Nashville, I got out of the military. Me and my wife both was in the military, Connie, and we got out, Fort Campbell, and came here. But she said, well, why did you pick here? And I was like, I never seen this look on my mom's face. And long story short, Brad, because you did the story, my brother, John, back in the 40s, had lost their life in the bottoms because basically they were, he was in an area, and there was a white female that frequently visit this area, and she was found out that she would frequently visit the bottoms, and then when she got approached, the story goes is that she began to say somebody forced her to do things. And so you had this small lynch mob that went and looking to find who this person was, and John was the first person they found and saw, and they murdered him. And I'd never heard this story before. I was speechless. My mom was just very, with her look that I've never experienced, of not disappointment in me picking Nashville, but just Nashville, period. So from that point, again, I always try to take everything that's negative and try to find that positive in it. And I vowed that, look, man, I have to do whatever I need to do to make my mom and dad proud of the fact that their son chose Nashville. So now I got to make sure that Nashville is in a positive light with her. And so I just was on a mission. I've always been driven that way, but so anyway, I just like Chief Drake, and I'm sure that with any one of us speaking about, I've always strived to be the best I can be. I don't think any one of us would do things in a halfway manner. And so personally, I just feel like if you invest your time into anything, if you can't put your all, don't do it. That's what my dad used to always tell me. Now, I realize that God has blessed me and put good people in my life and allowed me to be the chief of the Nashville Fire Department, the first black chief since 1860. We was the first as far as being a paid fire department. So I feel myself being very blessed, and I have seen a lot in Nashville from that time to now. I just had a different viewpoint because I got to see many different areas and lived and visited many different places. And but coming to Nashville has been a blessing to me, and I have was surprised with some of the things, but I think we've come a long way. But we still have some challenges, but we're up to making sure when we lead by example, and I'm just happy to be here.
Wanted to ask you all about resilience this year. It's been a tough year. COVID-19, the economic downfall, obviously with the schools, the police department, public safety, the bombing, Christmas Day. Could you talk to us a little bit about where you drew your strength this past year to be able to lead? And if we could start with Chief Drake, then Chief Swan, and finish with Dr. Battle.
You know, my strength came from overcoming adversity throughout my entire life, pretty much. Don't share this often, but when I was a little kid, I had this bad speech impediment, and I couldn't really talk in front of people because I would just stammer and stutter and go on, and I drew strength in just being, because I wanted to be able to stand in front of people one day and talk without, I guess, massacring the words. And then as I came through high school, I played sports, and I was always the team captain because I had this drive. I worked harder than anyone else. I was very diligent. In fact, I really wasn't one of the best athletes at first, and I wanted to be. And I went and bought a weight set at Kmart, and I remember catching the bus, going to Kmart. I saved my money up, and I get to this back aisle, and I picked up these weights, and it was super heavy. I couldn't pick it up, and I had to get someone to help me. Carry it on the bus. All the way home. That's the kind of drive I had, and I take the same in my approach now. There's nothing that I feel I can't accomplish if I really put my mind to it and I really drive hard to get there. 2020 was one of the most difficult years I've had in 33 years. We had a tornado, a pandemic, civil unrest, more of the pandemic, and then to top it out, a bombing to close out the year. And I draw my strength from just being diligent, having that work ethic, and really I wanted to always make my dad proud and my mom, because they grew up really with nothing, my dad being blind and mom disabled, and every time I do something, any recognition that I get, any recognition that the police department get, while I'm sitting in this seat, I draw back to them, because the strength comes from them believing in me. And they, could have told me a million different things, but they believed in me, and I worked hard, and I continue to, and that's where I draw my resilience. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think similar to Chief Drake, but I just think, being the director of the Office of Emergency Management, I get a good bird's eye view from the city standpoint, from the infrastructure itself, and then knowing our partners from state and federal. It's just a tremendous resiliency, and I think especially working with from the police department to schools and so many other entities that the department or the city has. And I think for the people even viewing this to understand how well the city works together is very important. And at the helm of the Office of Emergency Management, again, we get to orchestrate that and be understanding that 2020 was such a challenging year. But listen, the men and women that work for my department, it's just been incredible watching them. Because all of them, every one of them, have the heart of a servant. And I think all of us can say that about our people that work for us, because they're the one that make it happen. But we did many challenges throughout this year. And I know Chief Drake was saying to top it off with a bomb. I mean, it was like 2020, we were all wanting to get done with it. I remember New Year's Eve, I mean, it was, we were like, let's get rid of 2020, and then 2021 came, and it seemed like God said round two, and we jumped right into, we flooding and all these other things that we deal with, and then, declarations and dealing with our other partners to try to make sure that the city get back money that's needed to help the resiliency of the city. So, yeah, a lot of challenges, but one thing I can say that I do, and not to be construed wrong, the great thing about challenges, it brings people together. It makes us not look at each other for skin color or where you're from or what you believe in. when hard times hit, and I've learned this from the military in wartime, or also when we're dealing with issues in the city, when they overtax one of us and we all got to pull together, it don't matter what my brother or sister look like or where they serve or who they believe in. It's about resiliency and survival, and that in itself brings out the beauty of mankind. We got to work together to accomplish the mission, and that's where we show our resiliency when we come together and we work. I work closely with the schools all the time. People won't believe that, but we work closely with the schools because, I mean, that's our priceless commodity. And the police department and us, I mean, you know, we're brothers, right? We do everything together, and there's so many other departments out there that are like that. But again, the resiliency of this city is not just us, but it's also the people that live in it. So that would be my saying for all the great work.
No, thank you very much, Chief Swan. And Dr. Battle, this year has been tremendously difficult with kids being out of school, all the tensions related to virtual learning, and this learning loss. So could you talk a little bit about where you drew your strength in trying to get through that tornado, COVID, and everything else that came through?
Yes, very unique year, and I'll just start by saying I'm a woman of strong faith, and so when met with adversity or challenges, I know exactly where my strength comes from. But I'll reflect first back on some experiences I had as a student in MNPS. And it goes back to your question about did I graduate as a valedictorian or salutatorian of my class. And I actually was on a special transfer to John Overton High School. And I remember after getting my first report card, taking it home, and my mom said, wait, what? Let's go over these classes that you're enrolled in now. And so I remember us going up to the school and sitting down with my counselor, and my counselor explaining to her that, well, those classes were full. And so we weren't able to get you in those classes. And in order to go back and be in those classes, you got to go back and retake courses that you've already started in. And I remember going home to my dad and talking about it and being disappointed. I also will recall a story, and I wrote about this for some of previous awards that I've been recognized with, that my junior year, I remember my high school principal coming to me and questioning me about why I was not taking on more leadership roles in the school. And at the time, I had not deemed myself a leader within the school. I was an athlete, I was a captain of the team, and had lots of things going for me, but still had not put myself in that space. And went home and talked to my parents again, and I ended up throwing my name in the hat, and I ended up winning. But as I reflected back on that, I did not see myself as a leader, but I also didn't see myself being in a position to win such a position because of the makeup of my school. I just thought statistically it's impossible for me to be awarded with that. And I'll never forget what my dad said, and going back to my courses and other leadership opportunities I wanted to be in, he said, don't give up. Now you've just got to focus on, you don't have to know everything, but make it a point to know something about everything. So as you're continuing your studies, as you're thinking about the courses you were not enrolled in, continue to just build your own capacity so that as you're moving off into life and into career, you'll be prepared for what's next. And so going off into college, having that opportunity to enroll in the courses of my choosing and graduating with high marks was very important for me, because I didn't have that particular pathway when I was coming through high school. And so as I take my lessons there and the hard work it takes and being determined to really build my capacity and being the best me, when you're talking about a school year like we've had this year, there's lots of things that we knew prior to the pandemic and prior to the tornadoes. But our commitment, my vision and my commitment with my team was to not be distracted by the things that we could not control. So prior to the pandemic, in the pandemic, identifying what do we want most for our kids. And you've probably heard me say this is really about every one of our students being known, because like in my situation, had I really been known, I wouldn't have had to, on the back end, try to figure out how to get in those classes. I would have been sought out. I would have been aligned to the right pathway to make sure that I was on a path towards my own success. And so it's really about every student being known. And when you think about the difficult decisions that we had to make, when we had to balance out virtual or remote learning, when we had to make decisions about the social distancing protocols that would be in place once we returned to school, those decisions, while difficult, ended up being easier than one could imagine. When you're talking about every student being known, when you're talking about the safety of our young people and our employees and their families, All of our decisions were grounded in that. So when you talk about the resiliency and building the strength to be able to make those tough decisions, it's about the preparation that happened early on, and being met with some failure, if you will, or things not going exactly the way that you intended for them to go. So through those experiences, through the life lessons of my parents, as was mentioned here, I was one of those individuals that thought at the end of 2020, yes, 2021 will definitely bring a new path and less distractions. I don't know why I was kidding myself with that. I definitely joined you in round two. But it really is about thinking back and reflecting on building the strength and capacity to overcome adversity, not losing focus of what your goals are, what your dreams are, and what you aspire to be, and provide for those that you serve daily.
May I? Thank you very much for that and for sharing a little bit about your growing up in Nashville. One of the reasons, well, first of all, I think we have to observe that if you at home, kids, would like to be a leader of Nashville, you better be a captain of your sports team. I think that's pretty obvious. One of the reasons we wanted the three of you together was because this is the first time in Nashville history that black people are leading schools, fire department, and the police department, and the Office of Emergency Management. We certainly don't want to shortchange you. Have two hats, Chief Swan / Director Swan. So at this moment, and we've heard each of you say, we hope to bring change. Nashville has, in each of your areas, challenges with race. There is a question about the makeup of the personnel in your departments, maybe not reflecting what the population in Nashville is. Nashville is 28% African American, 64% white. Your staffs don't necessarily reflect that. There were some issues with how children are disciplined in the schools, or what the breakdown is. There's some issues about who's getting pulled over, and with some candidates, how they're being eliminated from consideration that fall along racial lines. And I guess I'm wondering, since we have the three of you together, my general question is, can Nashville be a place of racial equity? And what can y'all do as leaders to help make that happen, even within your own departments?
Well, I mean, I guess I can go first. To answer your question, I think absolutely, yes, we can be. It's going to take work. And I think, number one, just having a conversation, a dialogue is the first step. And when I became chief of the department, one of the things that we did was sit back and look at how did we get to where we're at, and how do we reflect in a department sense the people that we serve. And you made a poignant point that is 28% of African Americans in Davidson County. I think we're right at 17 to 13. Please don't quote me on that percentage, but we're always striving to try to improve that. And I think the first way we do that is, of course, is again dialogue, conversation, and making sure that the people that we're trying to attract can see themselves in this position, see themselves as a firefighter, see themselves as a paramedic or a fire investigator or an Office of Emergency Management. Because again, we all understand that the first step in believing, unfortunately, unlike our faith, you got to believe it before you see it. But in most cases, we want to see it before we can believe it. So by us very much being here and carrying ourselves in such a manner that it draws attention in a positive way is very, very important. And I think that's one of the things that the first step that we can do to make a difference. And then I'm always very careful not to be over judgmental. A lot of times what people that get to this position, I think, well, we don't have any problem. I've made it here. We sound just like some other people that will say that, if they're white or whatever. Well, you don't have a problem. That's why you're the chief of the fire department. Well, my response is, just because you don't see it or you've never experienced doesn't mean it's not there. So, a friend of mine would say, numbers don't lie, facts are your friends. So for me, it's easy to open up our statistics or facts and look at that and look at those. And those numbers will share with you facts. And your job from that point is to make sure, how do we obtain more diversity in the department? If you don't have a diverse department, you're subject to fail. Not just, and we know diversity is not just black and white, it is from gender to race to what you believe, where you come from. All that makes up diversity, because you have to reflect the people that you serve. If you don't, you're shortchanging your department. And that's one of the things that we try to strive every day, to make sure that we are reaching out and getting, again, a part of the society that we treat. And so, again, it takes work, but we can get there.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I absolutely think we can, and we've been working on that. I've been very outspoken about our lack of diversity within the police department. I'll highlight that we only have 155 women, and we only have 24 women that are African American, and we only have 211 minorities. And so I've been intentional about our recruitment efforts. In fact,
That's out of over 1,000 sworn, is that right,
yeah,
Chief?
out of 1,500 allocated. So those numbers are very low, and it's not reflective of our city. And so what I did was I pulled officers out of patrol and put them in a recruitment unit, a very diverse group of officers, to go out and recruit people actively, just like you would for a sporting event. And then I've been highlighting our officers, highlighting our African Americans, highlighting our Caucasian, but highlighting our women too. And we did a segment called The Women of MNPD. And in fact, I had someone call me just the other day. They pulled up on a motorcycle officer, and they looked over, and it was a female officer. And she texted me and said, that was absolutely awesome to see. I did a video recently that I sent it out to all of the troops. I wanted people to see my journey and what you can do as an African American and where you can land one day. And then the big theme with our police department is community engagement, because people fear what they don't know. So we want to get to know the community we're serving, but we also want the community to know who we are. And from there, we build those relationships. We can have those conversations. It's a lot easier to tell someone the hard truth when you know each other, opposed to when you don't. And so we make those connections, build those relationships, and then we recruit from the same areas. Those people that want to be police officers, that want to make a difference in the community. And I know it's going to take a while, but I think we can get there.
May I, quick follow-up, and thank you for speaking about the makeup of your employees. Will you talk about the folks who are getting pulled over?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a report that came out of driving while black, and whether it was intentional or unintentional, those things were the perception of people. And really it was a disproportionate rate that were being pulled over. But from my perspective, the chief at the time and for years after that was trying to drive down crime. And so all of these stops, traffic stops, Terry stops, et cetera, was in what they call hotspot. It was hotspot policing. And so where more incidents were occurring, it meant more officers would go, there would be more interaction. And those areas are usually vulnerable neighborhoods. From my perspective, I've ended that. I've ended the flex teams, the crime suppression units, and that's all they did was proactive police work. And I built community engagement teams from that. And so now they're building basketball courts, tutoring kids during the pandemic that are out of school and maybe didn't have the home structure, can meet at community centers and help them. Building those relationships and not over-policing areas with the theory of driving down crime. So I think we're on a better path. We still have work to do, but we're building those relationships and mending some of those that we've hurt. And I think we've made some positive progress.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Yes, I would agree. I believe we can get there. We have a lot of work to do, a long way to go, but do I have a vision for what it can look like once we accomplish this work together? Absolutely. Absolutely. When we're talking about what we experience on the education end, I mean, very similar to what you've heard in stats when it comes to our employees of color, we see a higher percentage in our support roles as opposed to our certificated roles, which means we see a higher percentage rate in our leadership roles across our district as well. When it comes to our students, we see disproportionality in our punitive discipline practices with our students of color. We see the gaps with our students even in our engagement and attendance rates. And so we know that there is still significant work to be done. And so part of our efforts have been grounded in what we call one of our 4 core tenets. That's to identify and eliminate inequities that we see across our district, and making sure that we have the makeup in our staff and in our leadership to reflect the population of students that we serve on a daily basis. I've been able to reinstitute our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office so that we have a strong plan through an equity roadmap to make sure that all of our decision making, all of our planning, the way we progress monitor is not an afterthought, that we're very proactive, that we have strong retention and recruitment strategies to make sure we're shoring up all the gaps that we currently see. And I think, you know, if we reflect back particularly on the role of the director of schools, up until 2019, you would have always had a male sitting in the seat. So this is the first time in our district's history where our district is being led by a female, not only a product of the school district, but a female leader. And so being able to also launch leadership opportunities and programs so that our students can have genuine access to pathways towards success. When we think about the work we're doing with our Metro Schools Reimagined, it's all grounded in this space. It's aligned to our academies of Nashville, creating those strong pathways for students to have exposure, have opportunities, closing that opportunity gap, ensuring that our students see individuals and leaders who look like them, to mentor them, to teach them, and to pour into them as they're creating these strong plans to be productive and lifelong citizens here in Nashville or wherever they choose to live. And so I have a strong belief that we can get there. It will take collective efforts. I've been very encouraged and have an optimistic viewpoint based upon the conversations we've been able to have, digging really deep into the root causes of what we're seeing in outcomes for our young people and for our adults across the city. And so I think through that collective effort, I think we were able to demonstrate this in response to the tornado, the pandemic, the bombing in December, that, you know, when we come together, we can definitely achieve a lot.
Another quick follow-up, because apparently I don't want David to talk at all. There are 2 schools in East Nashville that are a mile apart. One is almost all black, right? One is mostly white. It's been a subject of a public radio podcast, and I'm wondering if the schools ever have to get to a point where they take, because parents bear responsibility, right? I wonder if the schools are ever going to get to a point where they're going to have to take choice out of it and be much more proactive about integrating schools.
It's a collective effort, definitely. And, you know, this is a space that I think if it was as simple as we would like for it to be, we would have had this solved a long time ago. But our Metro Schools Reimagined work is grounded in that very space. We are definitely looking at and digging into where we are with our demographics of our schools, who's serving our students, the choice options and pathways to make sure that our schools represent the diversity that we have in our city, and really embracing what that can provide for the educational experiences of all of our students. But we all play a part in ensuring that happens. I think if I reflected back on my parents' experiences, particularly my mother, I have a strong opinion about the force fit of making things happen. We want to make sure that those pathways are enriching, they're supportive, they are exactly the high quality experiences that we will want for our students who are at the heart of what we provide daily in our pre-K-12 space.
Well, this time I will take the mic for this next question. I wanted to ask you about mentorship and leadership development. How do you approach mentoring the future leaders, those who will succeed you in the future, and how do you encourage others also to mentor? If we could start with Dr. Battle and then end with Chief Swan, please.
Thank you for that question. I feel strongly about mentorship and leadership opportunities. Real conversation here, I would not be sitting in this seat or be humbled to be serving as a director of schools without strong mentorship and opportunities to develop my leadership skills as a career educator. And so I take that role very seriously. We are doing some very intentional work internally within the district and creating and launching a leadership framework. See, it's my belief that regardless of the role that any MNPS employee or employee across the city sits in, that they're a leader. And it's our responsibility as leaders, as directors and chiefs, to create pathways, to create toolboxes, if you will, for them to continue to build their skill set so they can respond accordingly and use their expertise to make sure that for the good of our district or for the good of our city, we have the right individuals around the table who can move things along and quite frankly, accelerate those outcomes whenever we can. And so that's another one of our signature initiatives in Metro Nashville Public Schools, being a product of MNPS, spending nearly my entire career in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I recognize that we've had some gaps in those spaces. I want not only for our students, but for our adult leaders to see opportunity. I want them to see opportunity to take what they know, their skill sets, their experiences, and someone already mentioned this. My experience as a Metro Nashville Public School student was much different from even some of my classmates that I graduated with, and I have to recognize that. But I have to recognize it and have to be willing to do something about that so that those opportunities truly exist for everyone. But in my role, that is a responsibility that I've taken on to create those leadership pathways and to be available and accessible to help mentor other aspiring leaders that I know exist right here in our great city.
Thank you. Chief Drake?
Yeah, so we're doing the same thing within the police department. In fact, our first core pillar is organizational excellence. And so we want to bring in the right people, vet out the right people, and then we want to train to a standard. Then we also want to create pathways for those individuals. So we have a mentorship program from the very first day they enter the police academy, so they can have someone they can talk to about whatever it is that's going on in their lives. We have peer support to talk to people as well, to mentor officers as they go through their transitions and difficult times. Then also leadership. We have every single promotion we train to a standard. We want people to be prepared for success and see the leaders. I've created a very diverse staff. We have, for the first time, we have 3 African Americans as chiefs, deputy chiefs. We have 3 women on the executive staff. And then we have 2 Caucasians. And it's just a very diverse staff. And the mentorship and paying that back to different people. And I've done that even when I was an officer working in the Police Athletic League. I mentored people and still mentor people today. They come in and talk to me. We had a lot of women and African Americans sign up for our promotional exam. For quite some time, we didn't have as many, and now they're wanting to be leaders, but not just leaders, but they want to mentor other people too. And so it's resonating throughout the entire police department. And I think that as being a leader, you set the tone for that. You set the direction and the vision, and we're moving forward with more mentoring.
Thank you. Chief Swan?
Yeah, I think to make it easy, I definitely agree with what's already been said. I think one of the things that the worst thing that we can do, we'll find an individual that we perceive to be a great leader and reward them by promoting them and then don't give them the tools to be successful. That is a thing that we're very common to do. Even within the fire department, one of the plans that we have tried to put in place, but it's just like since I've been in this role, it's been nonstop, but we're developing a leadership development plan because we understand that being a leader, to be a leader, it is going to cost you. Being a leader, there's a lot of sacrifices. Being a leader, it takes a lot to for self-awareness, even for ourselves. I'm sure they're just like I am. I'm constantly trying to better myself from reading and from listening and understanding that sometimes leadership is lonely. Sometimes you find yourself by yourself. You know, being a leader, you're not. You know, I tell Joseph and Kendra, who are with me just about all the time. You know, and they make a point to do this now. But no one comes in and asks the leader, "How you doing today? How do you feel today?" You know, the leadership. Again, we're still human. You've got areas of your own personal life that you got to make sure that is squared away. So for me, it's getting deep into your person, who you are. I mean, for me, it's my personal relationship with God, and then it's my family. My being a leader. What does my wife's faith look like? I mean, you know, I can be Chief Swan all day, but if Connie's not smiling, then what am I as a leader? If my kids are not calling me dad, but they call me William. What kind of leader am I? And then, of course, coming to the workplace, again, by example, everything you do reflects. I'll call it selling the brand or protecting the brand of the Nashville Fire Department. Everything you do from the time that you get up in the morning and put on your clothes and step out, you reflect the organization or the department that you are involved in. So with this that's already been said about the training aspect, that's important that you let people know that, because you may think you want to be a leader. I may think you will be a great leader, but when they realize what it takes to be a leader, I'd rather them be like, this is not for me. Because again, I've seen it happen where you'll take a great employee who is very efficient to the point that they got your attention. Then you promote them and you don't give them the tools to be successful, and they fail. And a failure is on me if that happens. So I try to make sure, I think, in speaking about that, it's just everything that's been said here, building this leadership model for us that's being worked on about being a leader. It's really getting deep into leadership, because leadership is just not when I have this uniform on. It's from being a person of faith, it's being a father, it's being a husband, and then of course it's being an employee, a great employee and a servant, a public servant to the city. So that's what I would say, along with what's already been said.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left of this panel, so Brad, I'll leave any final questions to you.
Are there people on Facebook who want to participate?
We do have very interesting questions with regard to your work with children. You've alluded to this, all of you, in terms of your work with schools, but there's an interest from one particular reader about how each of your organizations works to improve children's literacy, especially in the elementary school ages.
I will definitely start out in responding to that question. Yes, literacy, the cornerstone of the work that we do is the foundational skills that we need to be providing for our students. And we are very committed to, one, acknowledging where we've fallen short in building the literacy capacity of our students, and really doing something about it. We've just recently launched an initiative, Literacy Reimagined, which is about getting back to the basics of, in elementary schools, and prioritizing literacy, the resources that our students need, the training that our teachers deserve and should be provided in order to provide high quality learning experiences. Our Literacy Reimagined plan extends even beyond the walls of the classroom. We're planning around collaborating with all of our stakeholders, because it will take the quality instruction inside of the classroom. It will take strong instructional leadership from our principals and our school leaders. It will take from me as a director of schools to keep literacy at the forefront of the work that we do, not only in elementary school, but really thinking through the through line for our students through high school, and then as what's required of them once they graduate. We're thinking through this through our key partners in our literacy work. We're providing training for our parents around things that we can do at home, and also with other community organizations on strategies and simple techniques to help continue to reinforce those skills for our students outside of school time. And so very critical work. We have released focused outcomes around literacy, because we will be progress monitoring. We will be adapting. We will be pivoting as needed based upon the outcomes that we are seeing. But it is a focused outcome for us as a district. We are prioritizing our resources and our time to make sure that it remains the top priority for us as we move forward.
David is a volunteer who reads in schools, and I started that process, but the pandemic waylaid my volunteering. Do you think folks are going to be allowed back in the fall?
I'm very optimistic that will be the case going into next school year. We've already announced that our students will be in person starting in August. We will continue to provide a virtual learning experience for students and families who choose it through our MNPS virtual school. But we're looking forward to welcoming our reading partners and tutors back into our schools. It's a critical strategy, a gold standard strategy that we're implementing to make sure that our students have the whole group instruction, small group instruction, and the one-on-one instruction to help them further develop.
I'm so pleased to hear that. It has been one of the best parts of my time here in Nashville is doing that, is reading in the
And
schools.
we thank you for your service.
Can you guys talk really quickly about how somebody can get involved in volunteering like you did?
Sure. In this case, it was through the Pencil Foundation, and if you go to Pencil on the website, you sign up. You go through kind of a scary background check. At first, I'm like, "Are you gonna be allowed in the school?" But then, thankfully, it all worked out, and then working with at that time a young kindergartner who was just a delight. We probably drew more than we read together, but that creative outlet was absolutely amazing, and it was, for me, it was transformative.
Pencilforschools.org. Feel free to pop onto their website, and that team walks you through the background check and all the training that's necessary to serve as one of our tutors.
Chief, have you looked at David's background check?
He's a safe guy for sure.
Okay.
But that's definitely something we do within our police department as well. We partner through literacy. I've been out to schools to read to students as well. I have a big card out in my hallway from students that said, "Thank you for coming to read to our class." In fact, we went over to school in Madison, and we took, I believe it was 5 deputy chiefs with us, commanders, inspectors, officers, and we pulled all these kids out and we read to them and gave them donuts. And we had donuts and drinks, and so it's good. But our SROs, we've repurposed them not to be just the security.
In case people don't know what an SRO is.
School resource officer.
Okay.
So not to be just there for, say, safety and security. They're there for that too, but also to interact more with kids, to help with tutoring, especially during the pandemic. We did a lot of that. We had students come over to Midtown Hills Precinct, help them with whatever studies they had, reading, etc., connected with families. We're actually trying to do a little bit more in eliminating the pipeline to prison, and I think that's one of the top aspects is through literacy and education, and so we very much want to be a part of that. And in fact, I'd had a conversation with Dr. Battle here recently about how we can do more together, and so big on my plate as well, but it's going to take all of us working together to get there.
You know, the school resource officers, I'm glad you mentioned that because, wow, they're being asked to do a lot, right? Yeah. You have to be a sworn officer who knows everything about, the law, and you have to be a trauma-informed, essentially guidance counselor in a uniform, and you have to be a good friend and ally, right, to the kids and the teachers. But I love that I did a story, and God bless, I cannot remember the officer's name, but she did, she created on her own time the day camp for children with special needs when she saw a need. And so I guess those, your school resource officers are really stepping in like big time.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was Officer Angie Booker.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Officer Booker.
Very, very good program. So.
Well, I again, that's sort of when you're the third person, it makes it a little easy. I too will go out and read to the students. I always make sure I know what book it is first. But anyway, interesting. And we have our firefighters that will frequently do that. But we have a program, a Blaze program, breaking limitations, accepting zero excuses. And we work with Pencil, and we work with a lot of the 12 core high schools, and a remarkable job the men and women do. They go into the schools and they work with these young men and women, and they are mentors and on every sense of that, meaning if it's schoolwork or if it's what career that you want to choose, or if you decide to choose the fire department or whatever, we bring guests with us from all facets of workplace to give them opportunities to choose, and again to see themselves to be anything that they choose to be, and then we stay with them. If they choose to stay with the Blaze program, and we help them, everyone has the opportunity now to go to college, and they can leave high school, go to 2-year school for free, right? And we encourage them to do that, and then if they stay with the program, the Blaze program, when they choose the fire department, then that would be the ideal candidate that we want. But if they choose parks or they choose public works or police department or the schools. I mean, whatever they choose, we just try to make sure we cultivate that and give them positive input. So again, Blaze program, breaking limitations, accepting zero excuses, a great program that we do, and we encourage just participation from our department and a lot of great positive feedback from the schools. Thank you.
As we near the completion of this conversation, we want to thank again Dr. Adrian Battle, the Director of Metro Nashville Public Schools, Chief John Drake, the Chief of Metro Nashville Police Department, and Chief William Swan, the Chief of the Nashville Fire Department. And Dr. Battle, you've heard this from me before, but if I could ask each of you to leave some words of wisdom to our audience before to help them get through this challenging time. Why don't we start with Dr. Battle and then end with Chief Swan?
Words of wisdom. You know, we started out this conversation talking about resilience. We've been dealt a lot of challenges and curveballs, if you will, over the last year. So I would just encourage everyone to continue to be resilient. We will get through this together. This is a time and a space where we should be able to leverage our resources, our time, energy, and support to one another. So I encourage everyone to keep pushing and know that there's greatness now and as we continue to navigate the remainder of this year and years to come.
I would say no matter what your situation is, what your background, where you live, what you're trying to accomplish, you can achieve those goals if you put your mind to it. Don't let people tell you that because you come from a vulnerable neighborhood or maybe you don't have the parental situation as most others, or maybe you just don't have the educational background that you can't be what you want to be. If you set your mind to it and you work hard and you're really diligent, you can be anything you want to be. And just be diligent about it and work hard, and then be humble when you get there. And once you get there, make sure you help people and you mentor other people to get them along the way too.
Thank you.
I would think, along with what's already been said, is make sure that get involved. If you have an issue or a problem or don't like the way something is done, the only way we've said this to change it is to be from the inside. But get involved. You know, if you want to make a difference or you want to see something that you would like to implement, then get involved. And then always remember, just be consistent. I think consistency rules out doubt. No matter where you came from or what you've done in your past, we always say the best time would have been, you know, then, but the next best time is now. So if you want to make a difference and you want to strive to be the best, you can do it. Just be consistent, don't quit, and always remember, again, just have a priority in place and be humble, and we wish the best for you.
Well, thank you again to our guests, to Brad Schmidt, our columnist here at the Tennessean. A special thanks to all our subscribers, and if you don't subscribe, Tennessean.com/subscribe. We welcome you into our family here at the Tennessean. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day.